Hello, everyone. Welcome to Stacking the Box. The NFL 2024 season has kind of already begun because the NFL Combine has begun, which is kind of the start of the season. So here we are. Super Bowl was just a few weeks ago. We're already getting ready for the 2024 season. Sterling Holmes joining me once again. How you doing, Sterling?
Good. I think it's the start of the new season for 31 other teams. We're still basking in the glory of the Super Bowl victory if you are a Chiefs fan. But yes, you're correct. The Combine started, got underway yesterday. And every team, including the Chiefs now, this is a time where you have to get back to the grind. You had a couple weeks to celebrate if you're a head coach, if you're a player, maybe even a little bit longer. But if you're a coach, you're a scout, this is your time to shine. This is your Super Bowl.
Yes, exactly. And this is for fans of teams like my Falcons, like I am. This is kind of the most exciting part of the year because we have a top. If your team has a top 10 pick in the draft is the most exciting part of the year because most likely during the season, you don't have a lot to look forward to. It's painful. Your team loses every week. Now is the time when those losses pay off. Now we get some excitement. You get to read some mock drafts. You get to watch a combine. You get to figure out what position that you want your team to draft. It's the exciting part of the NFL season for those of us who cheer for bad teams.
I'm with you, man. I know as well as anyone at working for the 10-win 76ers. Season sucked. Sorry, Ish Smith and Isaiah Cannon, I apologize. Not taking a shot at you, but your shots weren't going in. It was all about, can they get Ben Simmons, which they did, and we know how that turned out. But again, hope is for everyone. Hope springs eternal this time of year.
Trust the process.
TTP. Still trusting.
So before we get into the show here, I need to let you know about DraftKings because if you haven't signed up for DraftKings Sportsbook, what are you doing? Do it now. New customers will get a second chance bet up to $1,000 when signing up with their promo code STB. That means if your first bet loses, you'll get your full wager returned as a bonus bet up to $1,000. Signing up with our code STB not only covers your first bet, but also gets you access to daily rewards and other profit boosts. If you're looking to join DraftKings, go download the app and register with our promo code STB to make sure your first bet is covered. This offer is only available to new customers who are 21 plus and physically present in legal gambling states. Please remember to always gamble responsibly. Check this episode for the full terms of the offer to see if you qualify. Yes, the NFL season is over, but still, there's things to bet on. Go ahead and bet on the LPGA. Patty T, 28-1, another winner for me last week.
I was about to give you so much credit right there. I don't know how Iain does it. I'm not trying to gas him up. Everyone who listens to this show knows as well as I do, it's so fun when we rip on each other. But you got to give credit where credit is due. And Iain somehow is the greatest LPGA gambler of all time. Like, I don't think it's close. We're not talking top fives or top 10 finishes. We're talking outrights. A 28-1 outright. Iain just hit. Iain, here's to you, pal. You might not be able to beat me in Survivor, but you kick my ass very, very easily when it comes to LPGA. It's incredible.
Yeah, I'm thinking about just retiring and betting on women's golf for a living for the rest of my life. So go ahead, sign up for an account at DraftKings Sportsbook. Use promo code STB and bet on Yuka Sassow at 40-1 this week. And even if it loses, if you use code STB when you sign up, you'll get the money back in bonus bets. So there you go.
Wait, time out. I'm not saying you should do this, but you get it back up to 1,000, right? I'm not saying you should do this. Again, this is a horrible idea. Please do not take this advice. You put 1,000 on 40-1.
Yep.
Let's just say it hits, for example, here. What you walking away with?
$40,000.
You're walking away with $40,000. Iain,
yes.
I am. If I didn't already have a DraftKings account,
I don't recommend it.
I don't recommend it. That's about it.
I don't recommend putting $1,000 on an LP. I don't even know if you'd be able to bet that amount on an LPGA outright, to be honest. They might have some small limits. But if you don't want to bet 1,000, you can bet 100, and if it loses, you'll get your money back.
It's the confidence.
It doesn't have to be $1,000 bet.
It's just the confidence I have in you, Iain. That should speak volumes.
I appreciate that. So let's get into the show. We're going to skip over biggest winners and losers from this past week because I don't think enough happened for us to quantify a winner or a loser unless you have someone that you can think of. It's a pretty slow news week.
Yeah, there's nothing that really jumped out. I guess biggest winner, I'll say Cam Newton. Cam
Yep,
Newton for
I like
fighting off
that.
4 to 6 youths at some camp, and if you try to jump Cam Newton, it's not gonna end well. I don't care
Nope.
how strong or big or tough you think you are. I don't care if you got your boys with you. You're losing, man. Like,
Yep.
I don't care. Ian, if you, me, Richard, and the entire Arrowhead Addict squad, let's get them involved as well. If we all tried to go after Cam Newton, we're getting our ass kicked.
No,
Cam Newton, he threw the Uno reverse card down.
yeah.
Like, it was like an adult playing with a 4-year-old kid where you have your arm and the kids are just swinging like this and they can't get your body. Like, it goes to show you how large and strong these dudes are in the NFL, and especially Cam Newton. That guy is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, he once carried the entire Falcons defense on his back 10 yards down the field. So, yeah, I would not mess with Cam Newton. I don't know why that guy did it. I saw a video of him afterwards bragging about the fact that he beat up Cam Newton. I don't know what. Yeah, obviously has some issues with delusion because he got handled. Very weird situation. But yeah, Cam Newton came out the winner from that one. So let's dive into the top story, which I think right now is head coaching hires. We haven't talked about this too much over the past few weeks since all these new head coaches were hired. We touched on them a little bit last week, but I figured we could dive into it a little bit more. So we're going to go through what we think was the best head coaching hire, the worst head coaching hire, and then the biggest name that we're surprised by that has not been hired as a head coach. So why don't you start us off? Sterling, who do you think was the best head coaching hire this offseason so far?
Heading back just very quickly,
Yep.
I have my biggest loser,
Okay, let's hear it.
Florio.
Why? What did he say? I missed it.
Oh, Andy Reid's getting an extension, of course, or at least a revamped contract, supposedly making him the highest paid head coach in football. But you know how just a couple weeks ago he's like, well, Andy Reid's going to retire, maybe, possibly. According to our source, I looked it up. There were 7 at least in a 2-paragraph subsect where he had the words could, potentially, possibly, might, and you're sitting here going, this is completely unfounded, yet Florio time and time again keeps throwing this garbage per a source. Like, dog, you have zero idea what you're talking about. Either your source is completely wrong or I don't want to say he's lying because I feel like I don't understand why he keeps with this narrative. Jim Harbaugh is 60, right? He's 60. Guess how old Sean Payton is? 60. Guess how old Andy Reid is? 65. Guess how old Pete Carroll and Belichick are? 71, and I forget how old Pete Carroll is, 72. And they keep talking about how they're going to get next opportunities. Everyone in the national media is talking about that, but somehow Andy Reid, because he's sturdy and has a mustache, it ages him 15 years. Like, it blows my mind. I get he's not the pinnacle of health, but Andy Reid is football. What would you think Andy Reid's going to go fishing? What is he going to do when he retires? Is he a golfer? No, he'll hang up those Air Force Ones when he's good and ready. Right now, football is his life. So I'm sick and tired of these unfounded articles that just throw possibly, maybe, could be, according to source. And they're completely just
Fictional.
Fictional, aghast from the truth. And so it blows my mind. So biggest loser is that guy, since Andy Reid is now supposedly getting, now here's me saying supposedly getting, but according to a source, going to become the highest paid head coach in football. So
Yeah, that's kind of Florio's shtick, is he just hears a rumor and then writes articles about it. But I mean, like, yeah, and almost everything he says is could be, possibly, maybe. But I mean, like, anything could happen.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say that about literally anything.
It's the Shanahan thing when is Jimmy G going to be your quarterback? And he goes, well, or is anyone going to be alive on Sunday? And
Right.
you're like, well, okay, good. Touche.
Right. All right. Best head coach hire so far.
Sorry, I went on a rant there. Best head coach hire, Jim Harbaugh. He's done nothing but win. Even in his short tenure in the NFL with San Fran, he took a horrendous team, turned him into a perennial contender, especially in the NFC West. Again, I don't know if it's going to be that quick in LA with the Chargers because I think there's a lot of cap issues that I don't know how much he's going to have a say in. But overall, they got their guy. Like, I think Jim Harbaugh was probably the most sought after head coach on the open market, and the Chargers got them. So I think this, for me, was the best head coach hire.
Yeah, I think that's obviously the obvious choice. I've seen some poll results, and that's, by and large, the number one choice for most people. I'd go with Raheem Morris, though, of course, bias aside. I talked about Raheem Morris a little bit last week, but I think he was a fantastic hire for the Falcons because I think he learned a lot from his previous head coaching experience. And I think he's coming into this one serving as more of the CEO of the team, like we've seen with guys from Dan Campbell. He's hiring the right coordinators. He's going to let the coordinators take over the majority of the work, both on offense and defense. And then he's going to just kind of be a leader of men. And by all accounts, he's one of the most liked figures in the NFL. I read that one of the reasons why the Falcons ended up hiring because he was showing them texts from coordinators. This turned out to be most likely Zach Robinson and some other players saying that if he signs with the Falcons as their head coach, that they would want to come play in Atlanta. So he's obviously a very well-liked guy. And if a guy like that can be that type of head coach instead of an overbearing head coach that needs to have the final say in every single detail, then I think he's going to be set up for success. I think the Falcons are going to be set up for success. So in terms of fit, I mean, a guy who's already been with the organization, a guy who knows that locker room, a guy who people in the locker room like him. I think it's a perfect fit for Atlanta. So I will say Raheem Morris.
Yeah, I like that one. I think you're right. Maybe even in the ilk as like a Dan Campbell type, different styles probably, but as far as the CEO type, right?
Yep.
I think that's a very good call. For me, I think an honorable mention, love to get your thoughts here. I think Antonio Pierce, I don't know what he's going to be, but the fact that his players rallied around and were so outspoken about him, you have to go that way. And the Raiders had a chance a couple of years ago when they had Bisaccia, right? Rich Bisaccia, and they went a different way. They went with Josh McDaniels, I have zero idea how he ever got another head coaching job. That dude was a train wreck. It happened exactly how we all thought it was going to happen.
Yeah, I think it. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, but this time I think they got it right. I think this time they went with what the players thought. Now they might be wrong,
Right.
but you have to keep Max Crosby happy. You have to keep the guys you're building around happy. And if this makes them happy, then they're probably going to stick around and play longer. Max Crosby is your franchise icon right now.
Right.
It sounds silly, but in the same way that you want to keep Mahomes happy, the same way in NBA you want to keep LeBron happy, you wanted to keep Michael Jordan happy, at least they never really kept Jordan happy. Let's be real now. Jerry Cruz and the rest of the squad kind of ruffled some feathers, but you want to keep your franchise player happy. This keeps him happy.
Yeah, I think Antonio Pierce is an interesting case because I think he was obviously the right hire for the Raiders, but also like if any other team hired Antonio Pierce, then would we have said it was a great hire by that team? I don't think so. Like if the Falcons hired Antonio Pierce, would it be like, oh, great signing by the Falcons? No, I don't think we would be saying that at all. But I think it is the perfect fit for the Raiders, specifically of the situation they were in last time, where they didn't keep the head coach, the interim head coach who succeeded at the end of the year. And then it was a disaster and they hired Josh McDaniels. Now I think they're kind of forced to do that. And also the Raiders, not only did they look better in the second half of the season when Antonio Pierce took over, but statistically much better team, especially defensively. Their defense is one of the best in the NFL the final third of the season. So it is an interesting case where I think it was a great hire for the Raiders and kind of what they had to do, but not necessarily because I think Antonio Pierce would be a great head coach no matter where he went. I would not be saying the same thing if it was someone else who hired him. So a little bit of a unique and interesting case there.
Yeah, he's a Raider. I mean, he's a Raider through and through. He fits that mold.
Worst head coach hire, or you have a coordinator here for worst coach hired.
Yeah,
I'm going to agree with this one, of course.
Yeah, I think you took my head coach, and instead of doubling down, I decided to go with Arthur Smith, former head coach of the Falcons, who's going to be OC of the Steelers, because why would you not go back to basically Matt Canada 2.0? I don't understand this whatsoever. The Steelers just canned a guy who ran a very bland, horrendous style offense. Now, I get it. They don't have a quarterback. They don't have a guy who's this stud who can elevate. But that means your offensive coordinator position, your head, that coach needs to be even better and more creative, not more bland, not trying to get the ball to your third string tight end perpetually while you have stars struggle to get the rock. So this is a bad move. Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren. Sorry, you're probably not getting the ball. Whoever the fifth string wide receiver is, get ready to have 800 yards.
Yeah, and what's interesting about Arthur Smith and the reason why he got hired as the head coach with Atlanta and now hired with the offensive coordinator with the Steelers, he was the offensive coordinator for 2 years with the Titans, and there's a 2 years Derrick Henry was, the best running back in the NFL. So how much of Derrick Henry was Arthur Smith's offensive system and how much was Derrick Henry being just Derrick Henry? It seems clear to me now after his time with Atlanta that was mostly Derrick. It's not like the Titans during that run had like this dynamic offense that was unpredictable and there was a ton of motion and they had great game plans. No, their game plan was just to hand the ball to Derrick Henry. And even that, Arthur Smith got away from that strategy, which was giving the ball to his best player when he went to Atlanta. So no, this seems like this is a disaster hire. Yeah, I don't see how this is going to pan out.
Yeah, it was 75 Derrick Henry handoffs and then 25%. All right, we'll do play action with Ryan Tannehill because there's 9 dudes in the box.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to say Dan Quinn for the worst head coaching hire. I think everyone would say Dan Quinn. Obviously, I'm familiar with him being with Atlanta. And I think now it is clear that a lot of the success that the Falcons had when Dan Quinn was there was not because of necessarily Dan Quinn. I think it was Kyle Shanahan, who was their offensive coordinator when the Falcons offense was the best in the NFL and went to the Super Bowl. And then Kyle Shanahan left to coach the 49ers and the Falcons fell off 2 straight years. And then Dan Quinn got fired. So their success correlated with when Kyle Shanahan was there. Now, is Dan Quinn a great coordinator? Sure. I would say he's probably a very good defensive coordinator, but some coaches are just meant to be coordinators and not meant to be head coaches. And hey, maybe he'll learn from his stint in Atlanta. Maybe he'll be better. But I thought there were a lot better candidates out there that Washington could have gone with over Dan Quinn. So I think that's easily the worst head coaching hire.
Yeah, it was interesting. I felt like he was going to be a slam dunk hire over the past 2 seasons. And then all of a sudden we saw what happened in the playoffs and we're like, okay, maybe he's just not good in big games, which quite frankly, if you're Washington, you're not there yet. But eventually you will get there. And if you have a guy who you don't trust in big games, like some guys are big game coordinators, big game head coaches, and some guys crumble. Andy Reid for a long time had the moniker that he was horrible in big games. Now, again, you can switch that. It helps when you have Mahomes versus Donovan McNabb. Like Shanahan right now is starting to get that label. I'm not saying you don't hire Kyle Shanahan, but let's be real now. Kyle Shanahan's starting to get the moniker of, yeah, he's great, but can he win the big one? Can he win the final one? He's not showing that ability yet. Dan Quinn has obviously not shown that ability and the ability to be a consistently good head coach. I think the defensive coordinator position suits him well. But again, he also had a lot of talent down there in Dallas. It wasn't like he elevated that team. It's kind of why Steve Wilkes got canned from San Fran. It's like, yeah, the numbers look decent, but look at the underlying numbers and also realize how much talent is there. I thought Dallas had a very, very talented defense. So how much of that was Dan Quinn versus how much of that was, and just talented offense as well. How much of that was Dan Quinn versus the players themselves?
Yeah, for sure. Biggest name surprised that is not hired as head coach. We both have. I think it comes down to 2 names. I think the 2 names people would say would be Bill Belichick or Mike Vrabel. We both think Mike Vrabel is the more surprising coach who has not been hired.
Yeah, I'm shocked by this. I'm not shocked by Belichick with his age. I know some folks might say, well, why? Is he going to retire anytime soon? Well, maybe not. But if you're trying to build an entire culture shift, don't you want a guy who you think could be there for 10 plus years? I like Bill Belichick fits in to me on a team that they have all the pieces and it's a 1 or 2 year fix. Like maybe I'm wrong here. My perspective is he wants to win a Super Bowl with another team just to say, hey, look, I did what Tom Brady did. It wasn't Brady. It was both of us. I could be completely off base here, but I don't know what team who's looking for a head coach is in that situation, who's in that scenario. There's not one out there. I also think Pete Carroll is an interesting one. I was befuddled he got canned. Made no sense. I thought Pete Carroll would have a decent market as well, although he is in the same boat as far as age. Where how long is he going to be around? Does he even want to go to a rebuilding team like, for example, Washington?
Right. I'll throw a name. I think there's a couple names that I was surprised didn't get hired. I think one is Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator for the Lions, but it sounds like he had a chance at the Washington job and decided to stay as the offensive coordinator in Detroit. But the other name that I was surprised by that I actually thought the Falcons might sign as their head coach is the offensive coordinator for the Texans, Bobby Slowick. Is that how you pronounce his last name? Slowick. Very surprised he didn't get a head coaching gig. He seems like the prototypical head coach that teams are hiring nowadays, the young, in his 30s, offensive mastermind kind of coach, and Bobby Slowick kind of checks those boxes. Obviously, was the offensive coordinator for CJ Stroud's rookie season, and he looked unbelievable. I thought if we were talking about getting a guy like that in Atlanta, I thought Bobby Slowick was the clear answer. Now they went with more of a Raheem Morris leader of men guy, and then they got the offensive coordinator is more of that kind of young, passing offense game mastermind. So we'll see how that works out. But I think the other name that we didn't mention is Bobby Slowick. I was surprised he's not a head coach right now.
Yeah, I thought maybe one more year. I think Ben Johnson was ahead of him. Again, Vrabel didn't make a lot of sense. I get where people are coming from as far as he might be more of a defensive-minded head coach, but I don't care. When you have the success that he had in Tennessee with what he was working with, they got the 1 seed with Ryan Tannehill as their starting quarterback. That's very impressive to me. If you're to make the case of how sustainable is that in the playoffs, I'll listen. But he clearly elevated that team. Yeah, the last 2 years were not great in Tennessee, but he had even less in the cupboard to work with. Mike Vrabel is a leader of men. When Jared Mayo went to, or I guess stayed with New England, that was a bad sign for Vrabel, because I thought Vrabel, it made too much sense. You and I think we're both on the same page there. When Mayo got that job, though, in New England, I was intrigued to see where Vrabel would end up going. And right now it looks like he'll be at least taking a year off.
What's going on with Eric Bieniemy? Left Washington. Does he just not have a job right now? This was a guy who everyone was saying should be a head coach. And then he went to Washington. Their offense wasn't great in Washington, and now he's just kind of in no man's land. What's your opinion on Eric Bieniemy? I think there's rumors that he's kind of hard to work with. The players aren't a big fan of him. Have you heard that? Where does he go now?
I've not heard the case with him? He's in UCLA. He just signed a job at UCLA to be the offensive coordinator / assistant head coach, I believe is what the title officially is. Heading back to the college ranks. He said, according to reports, he was not fired. He basically decided not to go back, which I found interesting. How much of that is truth? How much of that is, yeah, I wasn't fired, I was let go. I don't know. We might never know the full story there. He made a bad choice. He went to a sinking ship.
Right.
And the options weren't great. You have to end up either swallowing your pride and go and try and be an offensive coordinator somewhere else. Maybe you come back to Kansas City, but you're not taking the OC job, because as much as people and fans and players, maybe they like him better than Matt Nagy, you're not seeing Andy Reid can a guy, especially after winning a Super Bowl. That's not going to happen. So what would he be in Kansas City? So he didn't have good options. He bet on himself, and he went to a bad team. He went to Sam Howell and a horrendous organization. I will say there is a precedent for him to get back into the NFL. I think the best comparison is Steve Wilkes. Steve Wilkes was NFL head coach. He was a coordinator, then went to Mizzou as a coordinator, defensive coordinator. He was horrible. He was there he was decent for the second half of the season, but just absolutely miserable early on. Then he went back to the NFL. Then he got a interim head coaching job, and then he was a DC. Now he's obviously canned again. But I think there is a little bit of just because you go, and they're the same age, they're both 54. So just because you go back to college to work in there, I don't think this means his NFL tenure is completely done, but he's got to grow and work that back up yet again. Timing is key in the NFL. It has not been the case for him. He wasn't getting a job over Bobby Slowick. He wasn't getting a job over Ben Johnson. He wasn't getting a job over Vrabel. There were so many good head coaches who were still available. It was a bad timing for Eric Bieniemy.
Yeah, I didn't know that he signed with UCLA, so that's news to me. That's interesting. We'll see how that works out for him. All right, moving on to some other topics around the league. I hope you have something to add to this, because I don't. I'm on record. I'm not a salary cap or roster or contract kind of guy. So, Sterling, I hope you can help me out with this. But the NFL has increased their salary cap to $255.4 million.
Yeah, it's a $30 million increase, over $30 million increase. It was like 13%, something along those lines. It's a massive jump. The reason why it jumped so high is because all of the previous COVID measures, as far as they had to pay for certain different things, they're done now. It's gone. And it rose this much. The original thought process was it was going to be anywhere from around 240 to 245 million. Well, now you get up to 255. If you're a GM, if you're the money guy, you're feeling pretty darn good. But I do want to point this out. Well, I think every single team, Kansas City included, right? You think, oh, well, great. That means we can probably sign Chris Jones, L'Jarius, maybe a wide receiver. Well, every team's in the same boat now. Every team has more money to throw around. You might start seeing guys overpay, or teams, I should say, overpay for players. Like, for example, Chris Jones. Let's just say, just hypothetically speaking here, let's say it's 28 million AAV in Kansas City. Let's say you're the Bears. Bears got a lot of money to work with. They're trying to do something in Chicago. They're trying to turn this thing around. Maybe they think Chris Jones is the guy. They pay him 31 million. They're like, well, what's $3 million per year at this point? We got to get something going here. Washington has a lot of money to throw around. What if they say we'll give him 31 million per year? Well, then what does Chris Jones do? 3 million per year over 3 or 4 year contract? That's a lot of money. Yeah, I think it's going to be a fascinating situation where I think a lot of these great teams that they might have been up against the cap saying, oh, well, now we have some wiggle room. Well, not so fast, because every other team now has more money to overpay for players. The winner in this is the players, obviously. The players are going to be thrilled. And if this is a good indicator, you should start seeing the salary cap start getting these bigger jumps year after year after year. Some of the playoff games, obviously, as much as I hate it, as much as it irritates me, the game on Peacock, playoff game only. I think this upcoming year is the game going to be on Prime, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Like, that's just extra money. So salary cap's going to keep rising. Great indicator here, barring, again, another worldwide disaster.
In case anyone's interested, which teams have the most cap space heading into the offseason? The Titans have the most with 78.5. Then it's the Bears, Patriots, Commanders, and Colts. Texans and Lions actually coming in 6th and 7th there. Pretty interesting. Lions have all that cap space and have an NFC championship team. Least amount of cap space. Bills, they're in a tough spot this offseason. They're $40 million in the red. Then the Saints, who have been over capped for a decade. I don't know how that works. Dolphins, Chargers, Broncos. Tough look for the Broncos as well. Where are the Chiefs at? Chiefs around middle of the pack. They got 16.9 mil in cap space. Falcons have 32.8 in cap space.
And what I will also point out right now, those numbers on February 27th, they don't mean a ton.
Right.
For some teams, they do. But for example, just because I know how the Chiefs' situation is, MVS most likely is getting released. You add 11 million back onto that. Justin Reed's getting extended. You can add whatever the cap hit's going to be. It's going to get extended out. So you're going to take away 7 or 8 million. Tommy Towns, well, I guess Tommy Towns is already, technically a free agent, so he doesn't fall into the equation. Mahomes, they can move his contract into obviously into a bonus. They could save $30+ million right there. Like, there are so many different ways to circumvent the cap. A lot of it comes down to, is the owner willing to pay out of pocket? Because when you get these bonuses, they got to find that money somewhere.
Right. So
these are owners paying out of pocket cash right then and there on these signing bonuses to eventually extend the cap out. If your team's under the cap, it's a bad sign, but I wouldn't say it's the end all be all. For example, the Bills with Von Miller, there's going to be different ways for them to try and work around Von Miller's contract. Again, it's not great, but there always are ways in the NFL, as again, you mentioned by the Saints, about a decade now being over the cap.
Yeah. Bengals use franchise tag on Tee Higgins, which you called last week. Makes sense. Nothing really we need to add to that.
Well,
go ahead.
Just very quickly, I want to get your thoughts. Do you think this means, because I saw a lot of Bengals fans celebrating on Twitter, and you can look at it from two perspectives. The Bengals have typically been a team that aren't going to spend a ton of money. They're not going to spend a ton of cash, and so maybe they're trying to have one last hurrah with Jamar, T, and Joe Burrow. Cool. One last hurrah, then Tee Higgins hits the open market. That's fine. But part of me is thinking, did they tag him just to trade him? Because I think if you're a Bengal fan, you should be at least wary about that. Because they weren't going to let him go for nothing, obviously. They weren't just going to. So Of course, they were going to at least tag him. The Chiefs have a similar situation with L'Jarius Sneed. He's not going to hit the open market. It's either going to be a tag and trade or a tag or a contract extension. Tee Higgins was always going to get franchise tagged. But this does not mean he's playing in Cincinnati next season. So I would pump the brakes just a little bit. I don't know your thoughts there if you think he's there, if he gets traded. But if you're trying to rebuild or build for the future and you're trying to give Joe Burrow and Jamar these contract extensions, you might need to try and get some draft capital back.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't thought of that possibility of them doing the tag and then trade. I don't know. I don't have thoughts. It's interesting. I have nothing to add. Something I do have something to add to, which I'm very concerned about, is that there's reports JJ McCarthy is soaring up the draft boards. And if JJ McCarthy, the quarterback for the Michigan Wolverines, who he did win a national championship, and I'm not the biggest college football guy, but based on people who I trust in the college football world, not very high on JJ McCarthy. And if he soars up the draft boards, you know where he might end up? Atlanta, number 8, because probably the top quarterback options, unless the Falcons trade up, which I kind of hope they do, the top quarterback options are going to be off the board, and we might be left with JJ McCarthy. Do you have any thoughts on JJ McCarthy? Have you watched enough college football, specifically Big Ten, to comment on JJ McCarthy? Do you think he's going to have a good NFL career? Any thoughts on JJ McCarthy?
It's tough. Like, I'm not going to try and say he can't be a great NFL quarterback, but doesn't it feel a little Mac Jones-ish?
It does feel a lot Mac Jones-ish.
Yes. Who was a dude from Georgia? I know he was like 27 when he entered the NFL draft, wherever it was crazy. Not Brandon Whedon style, but a little younger than that. But like, you got a great team around you, a great coaching staff. You have all the best players. If you
talking about Stetson Bennett from last year?
Stetson Bennett, yeah. Like, if you don't look good, that's the real issue. I don't have strong thoughts, but typically guys, they jump off. Like, Caleb Williams jumps off. Drake May wasn't on a great team, obviously, but like, he jumped off. Now, again, Drake May always makes me nervous. Any of those guys out there in the non-Power 5 or traditional Power 5, it makes me nervous. The competition's a little different. But same time, you can find great quarterbacks everywhere. Josh Allen went to Wyoming. Sometimes you try and find those toolsy guys. I just don't know if JJ McCarthy has the tools. He just seems very Matt Jones, Stetson Bennett to me. Maybe more upside, maybe a little more talent than that. But again, what does he end up being?
Yeah, I'm trying to find a graph right now that I saw is today or yesterday, but if the Falcons draft JJ McCarthy, it's the graph I'm going to be looking at every day until the start of the season. Is that it was something like third and fourth down efficiency or something like that. And he was in a league of his own compared to the rest of the college quarterbacks. So, but then again, that's another thing. How much is that scheme and the talent around him? So,
and he looked great solid in the playoffs, right? I mean, that's got to count for something against top end talent. Joshua says JJ is a juiced up Tua.
I'll take that.
I mean, yeah, I think you'd take Tua. I mean,
absolutely. I don't need to go on the rant today, but Tua's the most disrespected, underrated quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, you know how many teams would like Tua Tagovailoa? Like 20?
Yeah,
at least 15.
Absolutely,
I would say 20. I mean, like,
I would love him in Atlanta. I'll take Tua right now.
So, I don't know, man. It's always so hard, especially quarterback rankings, when guys are in these powerhouse elite teams, because you can never tell who's lifting the weight. Like with Michael Penix Jr., they have a great team, obviously, like Roma Dunze, but like Michael Penix Jr., you saw against Texas dropping the ball in the bucket, like just phenomenal throws. Then you also saw him in the next game look atrocious. Yeah. So it's a little bit of a, oh man, where do you go with Michael Penix? That to me is going to be the biggest riser or faller. Like I could see him falling in the second round like Will Levis. I could also see him being drafted like 8th overall by Atlanta.
Yeah. Facts. Russell Wilson came out and said he wants to win 2 more Super Bowls.
And I won $1 million.
He didn't even just say 1. He didn't even say, yeah, I'd like to win 1 more Super Bowl before I retire. He's like, no, I want 2.
Well, let me see something here. Russell Wilson is how old? Russell Wilson is 35. Patrick Mahomes is 28.
I would have
So
guessed Russell Wilson's older than that. I would have guessed
so
younger.
so Mahomes is going to be in the AFC West for, let's just say, at least another 10 years, right?
Must be.
That makes Russell Wilson, 45, 46 at that point. So maybe when he gets 46, 47, he has a chance to win two more. I mean, like, they're not winning the AFC West. Like with Mahomes in the AFC West, it's not going to be Denver.
How about let's just state that he just has been like a bottom tier quarterback the past 2 seasons. How about that?
Oh, that's a great call. Is Russ going
I
to be
mean, you can talk
QB2
about
in
Patrick Mahomes
KC?
being in his division, but how about just the fact it's not good?
I love this. Is Russ going to be QB2 in KC? Yeah, that's how he gets 2 more rings. He becomes a backup in Kansas City.
Yeah, there you
go. Dude, he's
yeah.
cheeks, man. He is just buns. Dude is washed. I don't understand why Denver made the move originally. They're going to try and move on from him, I think. I know the cap hit's just an atrocity, but also you have to move on at some point. Like, at some point, you're just sitting here, what are we doing here? This isn't working. It's a sunk cost. You got to pay for it either way. Let's just get the hell out of this. It's an albatross.
You put this in the notes. Ravens likely to take Justin Madubuike.
Justin Madubuike, most likely going to get tagged by the Ravens, whether it's, again, a tag and trade. He was phenomenal last year. He was a top 5 interior defensive lineman last year. Ravens trying to keep the squad back together, obviously. Couldn't get it done in the playoffs yet again. Now I think it's finally fair to start having these Lamar Jackson in the playoffs debates. Like, I didn't think it was fair up until this upcoming season. Well, it happened. It's time to have this conversation. That team was elite. He looked bad, man. But Justin Madubuike is a game changer. He was going to be one of the top free agents to hit the free agent market. Obviously, I think him and Chris Jones, those interior defensive linemen, those pass rushers, if he stays with Baltimore, that's a big get for the Ravens to stay.
Bucks cut Shaq Barrett.
Yeah, I don't know what Shaq Barrett has left in the tank. What was he? A 2-time All-Pro, if I'm not mistaken. He's 31 years old. Really solid edge rush. Let me see what he did last year. Last year, 4.5 sacks, not great. Hasn't really been a huge factor since 2021. Obviously, I guess 2022 only played in 8 games. But Pro Bowler in 2021. He was phenomenal in 2019, real solid in 2020. But the last 2 seasons have been a big drop-off. If that's age, could be. If that's just the Buccaneers not being great, not a lot of they're trying to get younger as well, obviously, so less playing time for him. I wonder what Shaq Barrett does or receives on the open market.
And we have another offseason. We're talking about running backs. Franchise tags unlikely for Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, so this is according to ESPN. A lot of running backs who were really good hitting the free agent market. Derrick Henry, free agent. Josh Jacobs, free agent. Obviously, Saquon Barkley, free agent. Austin Eckler, free agent. I mean, I think it's been shown time and time again, why would you pay big money for a running back? Again, not saying they're not valuable, not saying they don't help move the needle, but is that the way you're going to build your team? You're going to give one of those guys $10, $15+ million a year when you can get Isaiah Pacheco on a 7th round contract, when you can get Bijan Robinson, first rounder, but on a rookie deal? You know, the shelf life of running backs, it sucks for them. It's not long. Yeah. Todd Gurley is still in his 20s.
That's crazy.
Let me confirm. I saw this yesterday, and I need to confirm. Todd Gurley is 29. 29 years old. Not everyone's Todd Gurley. I get that. But look at Derrick Henry. He kind of fell off. Josh Jacobs was phenomenal last year. But a couple years ago, was even the year before, he was really bad. Saquon Barkley has been hurt multiple times in his career. Austin Eckler's great. He's getting up there in age. When there's so much talent at a position and your shelf life isn't long, it's just economics. Like, it sucks, but it's economics, supply and demand. The supply of running backs is up here. The demand is down here.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Todd Gurley is only 29, and the last year he played in the league was 2020. But his stats fell off a cliff. He went from
Atlanta
averaging
legend.
4.9 yards per carry, was third in voting for. He was all pro in 2018, 4.9 yards per carry, then 3.8 yards per carry, 3.5 yards per carry with the Falcons. Now he's out of the league.
It's just tough, man. I do feel for these running backs. I know it's tough to say, oh, you feel for these millionaires. Yeah, but like in comparative to the rest of the league,
right?
They take like the most hits, a very physical job. They don't last very long in the NFL. It's like an offensive lineman you can play into your mid-30s. You know, it's definitely not a quarterback, but quarterback's obviously the rare spot. Like even corners and safeties last, linebackers last longer.
Yeah.
It's just, I do feel for running backs in the grand scheme of the NFL.
All right, let's finish with this offseason wish list. We'll just go with our two favorite teams here. What is, you'll talk with the Chiefs and I'll give the Falcons. Let's go top three. Top three on your wish list for the Chiefs this offseason.
Chris Jones signs an extension.
Number one.
That's number one
for you?
Not even close. Number one. Number two, I'm actually entertaining either ways, whether that's a sign an extension for L'Jarius Sneed or whether that's a tag in trade for L'Jarius Sneed. I don't think they tag him and then he plays it out in Kansas City. That would surprise me. Chiefs have so much talent and the ability to develop and identify talent in the secondary. They can't at other positions. So if you can trade him for, let's just say, a high-end second rounder, I think you do it. Like, I think you almost have to. The Chiefs only have 5 to 6 draft picks, again, depending on the compensatory picks. You might get one back from Andrew Wiley. You might get one from Juan Thornhill. Remains to be seen. Okay, so you're down some draft picks. You have some holes. Even if you bring back Chris Jones on the defensive line, almost need to make a move there. Linebacker, what happens? Can you bring back Willie Gay Jr. or Drew Tranquill? Then safety, obviously, in cornerback position. You want to keep developing talent there. Tackles, obviously, a big spot as well if you don't believe in Donovan Smith or Wanye Morris. So a lot of question marks there. My number 3 move would be a veteran wide receiver, and this is going to piss off a lot of Chiefs fans. That's not Mike Evans. That's not a high-end guy. I do not want to see the Chiefs spend $25+ million AAV on a wide receiver. I don't want to see it. Now, you might be saying, Sterling, how could you possibly say that after what you witnessed this year offensively with Kansas City? You mean hoisting a Lombardi where Mahomes in the playoffs elevated every single one of his guys? Yeah, that's the game plan. The regular season might not be as fun as in years past, but for a 3 or 4 game sample size, Mahomes and Andy Reid can elevate the receiving core. You have to spend money elsewhere because you know what Mahomes cannot elevate? He cannot elevate if he's getting sacked, and he cannot elevate the defense. So you have to find ways in the salary cap era. Not everyone is going to be an all-pro. So where I'm at is you bring in a Josh Reynolds, you bring in a secondary or tertiary guy, you draft another guy. Rashee Rice is, I think, a top 32 wide receiver next year. I think that's not without, I think it's kind of an easy argument. I don't think there's anyone that's going to disagree with that. You bring in a veteran, you draft a guy, maybe the second round. There's your top 3 probably. You still will have some guys, maybe Justin Watson, Sky Moore on a rookie deal. Maybe you get a little bit of something out of him. But that's the way I see it breaking down. I don't want to see this. You got to get Mike Evans. You got to get this, that, and the other. Then why would you let Tyreek Hill go? You just saw this. Don't do it again.
There you go. Top 3.
Atlanta, what you got, baby?
Number 1 is obvious. It's to get a quarterback, whether that is through the draft, and I hope it's not JJ McCarthy. Whether it's my hope would be trading up for one of the top guys in the draft, or signing someone, not Justin Fields, which I guess would be trade, not a sign. Hopefully they sign Kirk Cousins. There was a report today, I forget where I read it, but that their strategy, according to this report, is actually going to be getting aggressive and trading up in the draft for one of the top guys, not signing someone like Kirk Cousins. That would be fine, but obviously I think Kirk Cousins makes a lot of sense.
Kirk Cousins makes the most sense, but for example, you're probably not going to get Caleb or Drake May, but you might get Jaden Daniels.
Jaden Daniels, I think, yeah.
At 4. The issue is the Raiders, I believe, have 4, right? And they need a quarterback. It would take a lot to get up to 4. You would have to almost likely get up to 3 with the Patriots who want Marvin Harrison Jr. I think Kirk Cousins makes the most sense. Are you completely out on Justin Fields? Because
yes.
Okay.
He stinks.
I don't
Yeah,
think
he has electric highlights. He like one play a game. He looks really good, but he's not a winner. His passing metrics are terrible. And stop it with he doesn't have weapons around him. He had weapons last season. It didn't matter.
While I completely agree with you, and you and I were on the same page going into this season, we were befuddled by the Justin Fields hype.
Yeah.
I've now come to the conclusion that I think I've gone, or some folks have gone too far the other way. Like, I don't think he's this horrendous quarterback. I don't get like the MVP hype, but I think he's a serviceable quarterback. And I think he would actually be good in Atlanta. Like, there are more weapons in Atlanta. And I get it. You're the Falcons guy. So I'm listening to you. I think Kirk Cousins is number one. But as far as being able to have a running quarterback with all of the weapons that are down there in Atlanta with, by the way, a better offensive line in Atlanta than he had in Chicago. They've tried to revamp Chicago, and maybe it takes a step forward this year with some of those young guys getting into their second and third year. I get that. I think Fields would be pretty fun in Atlanta.
Yeah, but fun and good are two different things. Can you envision Justin Fields winning a Super Bowl as a starting quarterback in the NFL? Not a chance. And if my opinion, if your answer to that question is no about a quarterback, then you shouldn't even think about adding him unless he's the last option. If we get to the end of the offseason and for some reason, Kirk Cousins re-signs with the Vikings, the Falcons couldn't trade up in the draft, and we have no other quarterback options, and we can get Justin Fields for a somewhat cheap price, then yeah, for sure, go with Justin Fields. But that should be a last resort. He's not going to win a Super Bowl. He's just not a Super Bowl winning quarterback.
While I understand that, I also want to point out if Justin Fields goes to Atlanta, they're making the playoffs next year. Like, I firmly believe that if Justin Fields is the quarterback for this current Atlanta team, they get a couple more pieces and stuff, a couple more smaller pieces. They're going to win the NFC South. It's horrible. I mean, it's brutal. It's not going to be Carolina. I don't think it's going to be the Saints. I don't think it's going to be the Bucks. As long as you win 9 games, 10 seals it. 10's a lock. You win 9 games. You win 9 games with Justin Fields compared to Desmond Ridder last year? I think you are.
All right. So number one is quarterback for the Falcons, obviously. There's a lot of, subcategories of that, but we definitely need a quarterback. We're not going into next year with Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heinicke. I think there's a better chance of me being quarterback for the Falcons next year than Taylor Heinicke or Desmond Ridder.
Cheaper.
Yes. Yeah, I'll sign for a league minimum. Number 2 is a pass rusher. Much like the Chicago Bears are cursed to never get a good quarterback, the Falcons are for some reason cursed to never get a good pass rusher. I don't know what it is. I was just, while you were talking earlier, Sterling, I was trying to look through to see when the last time the Falcons finished in the top 50%, just the top half of the NFL in sack percentage, 2017. And it was a 1-year blip. And then after that, it went right. Every single year, you look at sack percentage, like 28th, 29th, 32nd, 32nd, 26th. We need a pass rusher.
Was that the 1 year that one guy had 19 and a half sacks or 20 sacks for you guys?
Yeah. Why am I blanking on his name?
I know. I'm the same. Then he went to Tennessee, I think.
Oh, I would know this. I don't know why I'm having a brain.
Come on, Falcons guy.
Vic Beasley, wasn't it?
Vic Beasley, I believe, is who it was.
Let me verify that. Yeah, Vic Beasley had like what? And that was probably 2017 when we were like 14th in sacks. No, it was actually the year before. 15 and a half sacks he got. Yeah. The only thing he ever did in the NFL. And then he completely fell off a cliff. Now he hasn't been in the NFL since 2020. So yeah, we had 1 year of Vic Beasley. We need a pass rusher. And I wouldn't even be surprised, especially if the Falcons sign like Kirk Cousins or another quarterback in free agency. I wouldn't be surprised. Even if they don't, I wouldn't be completely shocked if the Falcons go pass rusher 8 overall. If they can't trade up and get a quarterback that way, wouldn't be shocked if they go pass rusher 8 overall. So that's number 2. And number 3, which actually I wouldn't be surprised if they go this position 8th overall in the draft, is we need another wide receiver. We obviously have a lot of top end talent. We have Bijan Robinson, a running back, Drake London, wide receiver, Kyle Pitts, a tight end. We do not have a second wide receiver. Let me I thought I had the depth chart up, but let me just bring this up again. Our number 2 wide receiver as of right now is Van Jefferson or Kadarrell Hodge. Drake London is just going to get double teamed every single play. So let's get someone else in there as a wide receiver too. And then we're looking great heading into next season. Our offensive line is solid. We don't need a ton of help there. Our defense, a second corner would be nice. AJ Terrell, by the way, didn't have a great season. We needed him to step up. Jesse Bates was, in my opinion, could have been defensive player of the year this year. Our linebackers are solid. Let's get a pass rusher. If I were to put number 4 on the wish list, it'd be a second corner. Let's get a second wide receiver. And please, for the love of God, let's get a quarterback. Please. I was wrong about Desmond Ridder last year. I said all offseason Desmond Ridder was going to be the guy. Hand up, I was wrong. And I wasn't even close. He stinks. There you go.
I told you.
I know. You're right. You're right. But what else? Well, what else was I going to do? Like, you have to have faith in your team.
Do you?
Well, if Justin Fields signs with the Falcons, then I will not have faith in my team. Well, it'll be a couple exciting games, I'm sure. A couple good highlights for Twitter, but then we'll finish 7-10 again. All right, we're a little bit of a shorter episode, 10 minutes shorter. Actually, we went longer than I thought we were going to. But yeah, that has been stacked in the box. Any final thoughts, Sterling? It's Combine week.
It's 70 in Kansas City. Hit the sticks if you're in the Midwest. You never know when you'll have another nice day in February. Combine is this week. We'll keep you up to date next Tuesday with all the happenings around the Combine in Indy. Iain, do you have final thoughts?
Yes, just for any Canadian listeners out there, don't worry, I just did the translation for you. That is 21 degrees Celsius in Kansas City.
Seems chilly.
No, 21 degrees. That's
21
70.
degrees is cold.
No, that's 70. It is not that warm here in New York. It is 12 degrees Celsius here in New York, which, let me do the math here, 53 in Fahrenheit here in New York. So not quite as cold, but still decent day. Yeah, there you have it. I will not be golfing because it's too far outside the city. I won't be golfing outside until May. But I hope you enjoyed, Sterling. All right, that has been Stack in the Box. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, rate and review the podcast. Just because it is the NFL offseason doesn't mean we're going to stop doing shows. We will be back every single week, Tuesday, noon Eastern. And next week, hopefully we will have some results from the Combine so we can really start diving into the NFL draft. So thank you all so much for watching and listening, and we'll talk to you next week.